God, take away everything I think I know about this book, about this process, and about you, God, so that I can have an experience with you. So today we are going to go over the last 2/3 of the fourth step, which is the fear inventory and the sex inventory. So we're going to start here at the bottom of page 67. It says, notice the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. And so what they're referring to is here, right? See how it's bracketed. Cool. It says this short word somehow touches every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we, ourselves, set the ball rolling? So we're going to highlight from this short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives, all the way down to set the ball rolling. So the big book is introducing the idea that even our fears are something that we need to take responsibility for. Now, I know when we are living in obsession, which is the ability to believe a lie, and the majority of our life is run by us believing the story and the narrative that's going on in our head, we feel like we don't have a choice, right? But to believe the stuff and the thoughts that come, and we have an emotional response, and that's what we do, and that's our experience. So again, I'm gonna go back to the idea of the pause, which we discussed a long time ago. So the pause being the key to becoming the master of our own experience, right? Because in that pause, we can, choose how we want to perceive a situation, therefore choose how we want to feel about the situation, and therefore choose how we experience each situation. So if we've been practicing the pause up until this point, then it should be something that we have been sort of implementing into our tool belt, right? Now, sometimes we don't know how to see outside of that fear, right? So in that pause, again, we can reach out to another member of Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever Anonymous, or a mentor or a guru or whoever we look up to, or someone who's been through the situation that we're afraid of, and get a different perspective, if we can't come up with that perspective on our own. So it says, sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. Now that might be hard for some of you to believe, but once we write the inventory, we can look at that, right? It says we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. Even though we had no resentment in connection with them, we asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to make a list of our fears, much like we made a list of names of people that we resented, so we have a beginning and an end. And once that list is done, we're going to look at one fear at a time, right? And we're going to answer a couple questions as a result of that thing. So basically, we're going to write down the fear. We're going to look at what decisions or actions we made based on that fear. And we're going to look at what unmanageability happened as a result of those decisions or actions. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The first one is going to be sort of a light whatever fear, and the other one is going to be something a little bit deeper. So the first fear that I had was I was afraid of roller coasters. Now the book talks about looking at where that came from. So where it came from for me was when I was really young. I was born deaf, and we didn't know why. We found out that I had fluid in my ears, and eventually when they figured that out, they drained the fluid from my ears, and my hearing was really sensitive. And loud noises scared me. One of the first roller coasters I went on as a child was Thunder Mountain, which is really loud, and I associated that fear of the loud noises to roller coasters. And I did not go on another roller coaster from that age until probably I was 30. So the decisions or actions were, not going to certain kids' birthday parties who went to, Magic Mountain or Disneyland for their parties, being the kid who made the decision to, you know, wait in line all the way up until the point of, people getting on the roller coaster and then dipping out at the last minute, avoiding certain conversations with kids at school who were sharing about their experiences on roller coasters. And the unmanageability that happened was, feeling different, not feeling a part of, feeling shame, feeling weak, and not, immersing myself in social things, right? So that was one fear. Another fear is being afraid that I'm never going to be able to be loved, okay? Now, where did that come from? So this is my guess. I feel like that came from the fact that my father left when I was around 2.5 years old, or 1.5 years old. Now, that may be too young for you guys to think me to remember, but for some reason I remember vividly the time that I did spend with him before I left. And I did not understand why he left. I thought it was about me. I didn't understand that he left the relationship with my mother, and I didn't understand why he didn't try to see me again. I didn't understand any of that. I really just thought that I was not lovable. So, the actions and decisions I made. Well, in feeling not lovable, I tried really hard to be lovable, and I sold out my integrity to do so. I lied to kids to try to get them to like me. I gave away toys to try to get kids to like me. I acted tough to try to get kids to like me. As an adult, it affected my relationships in the sense that I, was very promiscuous. I lied and cheated to women because I was afraid of getting, emotionally wrapped up. I was emotionally unavailable, excuse me. And I sabotaged relationships that were, decent relationships because, again, I was afraid of getting close or getting hurt or whatever, right? The unmanageability that ensued was, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up because I was trying too hard. Also, as an adult, I hurt a lot of women through lying to them, through cheating on them, through behaving a certain way to get them to like me, but that was disingenuous to who I actually was. And, later on, it affected me in the sense that I lost a relationship with one of my sons over it, and I lost a relationship with my family over that relationship being lost. So it definitely affected me and created unmanageability, not only in my life, but in the lives of the people around me. So when it talks about fear ought to be classed with stealing, it seems to cause more trouble. That's kind of what they're talking about. When we start really taking a look at how fears affect us and the unmanageability it creates within ourselves and others, it's pretty big. It's life-changing. So it says, perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. Now, this is conditional here. You're not on a different basis just because you're sober, and you're not on a different basis just because you've read this far in the book. The only way that you'd be on a different basis is if you are passing this book on to as many people as you possibly can and practicing being of service, practicing being the blessing. In fact, choosing to practice being the blessing instead of managing whatever part of your life that you're afraid is not going to work out for you, right? That's how we build that trust. Because in that process of, okay, cool, I'm afraid that I'm not going to, make it in life financially, or my dreams are not going to come through. Instead of trying to do a bunch of shady stuff to try to make money, basically I throw myself in the book work, and which launches me into the present, which allows me to see the opportunities that are presented to me in each moment. And, I see that God takes care of me. The universe always takes care of me. Somehow a roof has always been over my head. Somehow food has always been in my belly. Somehow I've always been taken care of no matter what, right? But I don't know that unless I'm actually doing the work and giving the universe a chance to take care of me, And part of my responsibility is to not act out on the fear and to just do my job to serve the universe and let everything else fall into place. It says we trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. So again, this idea that God is limitless, and just as we are limited, right? So we're tapping into a limitless well of power. That's what we gain access to. That's what this process is all about. That's what this practice is all about. It says we are in the world to play the role God assigns. So God has assigned us to serve God. That is the role, right? So if in step 2 we talked about coming to believe and choosing that God is everything, then to serve God would be to serve everything, right? Every single thing that presents itself to us in each moment. That is the role that God assigns, So being the blessing. Now again, we talked about the idea that this is not natural for humans because we're about self-preservation and getting ours and making sure we're okay and all these things that are sort of like based in the fear of us not being okay unless we do that stuff. So we need to practice this, right? In order for that shift to happen, in order for that spiritual experience or God-powered personality change to happen, we need to practice this. So basically, again, this book is just a tool to get outside of ourselves and think of another human being and how we may help their needs for the hour or hour and a half that we spend with them, right? And again, the more that you practice that, the more it shifts who you are. The more you become the person that is just the blessing, right? It says, just to the extent that we do as we think God would have us and humbly rely on God, does God enable us to match calamity with serenity. So we're going to highlight that whole paragraph. And it's really just telling you that when the shit is hitting the fan, help somebody else, right? The universe will take care of you. The more that you spend time helping other people, the more you're going to not even feel like the shit is hitting the fan. The more that you're just going to see the blessings in life, because remember, everything is about perspective, right? The thing that I learned about the fear inventory mostly is that fear has nothing to do with reality, right? Reality is right now in this very moment. Okay, the idea of being afraid of never being loved, or being afraid that my dreams are never going to come true, being afraid that I'm not going to be able to support myself financially someday, or being afraid that, I'm never going to have a relationship with that one son, or being afraid, whatever. All that stuff is not now. Now is this book, this video, me sitting in my home in Bali. That is now. And in the now, everything is absolutely perfect. So, fear is just a story that I write in my head. It's not really reality. Just as hope is a story that I write in my head. So why don't we choose hope instead of choosing fear? It's just as believable. Okay. So, it says we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, which means opposite of what one might expect, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let God demonstrate through us what God can do. We ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what God would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. And we're going to underline all of that from it was a way of strength all the way down to outgrow fear. Now, if you notice, I keep replacing the word he with God, and that's just for my own concept of God. I personally don't attach a pronoun to the word God because when I humanize God, I make it smaller, and God to me is something bigger than all of us. But if, he works for you, that's all good. This is just my own personal preference. And again, we get to connect to whatever we want. Now, they're talking about all men of faith have courage, but it depends on what we have faith in, because we talked about faith in step 2, about just sort of the action of faith, right? And even faith in our own reasoning has not worked out so much. So for me, in order for me to really have courage, I need to have faith in a power that loves me, wants the best for me, is taking care of me, and forgives me no matter what. Because it's those concepts that basically allow me to feel like I have a safety net underneath me at all times, and that I don't ever have to worry about anything that's going to happen in the future. I don't have to feel bad about the stuff in the past. It all made me who I am. And everything in the moment is the perfect situation for me in that moment, you know? And that kind of thinking and that kind of courage comes from that concept. So I hope that makes sense. So that is the fear inventory. So now we're going to talk about the sex inventory. It says now about sex. Many of us needed overhauling there. I absolutely did. I smoked meth. My sex inventory was a mess. So it says, but above all, we try to be sensible on this question. It's easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for more sex and more sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that the most of our troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for its fare, and the other would have all of us on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. That's very important. It says we do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems, every one of us. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? So we're going to underline, we do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? And this part right here really is talking to the person who is hearing this inventory. And, you know, when we come up with the ideal, it's not my job to impose my idea of what the proper sex relation is for the people that I'm working with. Right? If someone that I'm working with wants to have a polyamorous, orgy-based sex life, cool. How can we do that with integrity? If the person I'm working with only believes in monogamy and wants to get married and wants to wait till they have sex until, you know, they get married, awesome. How can we do that with integrity, right? It's all about how to do things with integrity. So it says, we reviewed our conduct over the years past, and this is the sex inventory. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to write the list of names first, and then next to each name, you're going to answer these questions, right? So the first question was, or is, where had I been selfish, right? The second question is, where had I been dishonest? The third question is, where had I been inconsiderate? So that's like 3 different questions. And it doesn't say, have I been selfish, have I been dishonest, or have I been considerate, but where? So you need to be thorough about how you write that inventory and list examples of where you have been those things. Next question, whom had we hurt? Next, did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy? Did we unjustifiably arouse suspicion? Did we unjustifiably arouse bitterness? Then we're going to look at where are we at fault? So looking for our part, and go the extra length, what should we have done instead? It says we got this all down on paper and looked at it. So we're going to underline this whole paragraph. And again, let's all take a moment that the sex inventory questions are located on page 69 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That is not a coincidence. That is amazing. So this is your sex inventory. It says, in this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. So an ideal should come from the sex inventory, you know, to figure out what you really want and how you really want to show up in your relationships. It said we subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. So it's between you and God, right? We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. So we're going to underline and highlight, we ask God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed, right? Because we don't want to hate ourselves. That's not the point of this. We want to fall in love with ourselves because, fundamentally, we are the light of God, right? It says, whatever ideal turns out to be, we must, and we're going to circle we must because, again, it's direction, right? Be willing to grow toward it. That doesn't mean that you're going to be it immediately. It says be willing to grow toward it. It says we must, and we circle we must, be willing to make amends where we have done harm. And again, that's going to come in your A step, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in doing so. So we'll talk about that once we get to the amends. It says, in other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation. So, for those sticklers who say that the steps are written in order, they're suggesting that we're already meditating on page 69 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous in terms of the sex inventory, right? So in meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. It says God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. And we're going to underline that sentence. And the reason for it is we realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. And you're going to underline all that too. So again, not everyone goes through this book. Not everyone reads this stuff. And there's a lot of sponsors out there that have ideas of what is integrity in terms of a sexual relationship. And a lot of people fall in line with what society tells them, and they will try to impose that on the people that they're working with instead of figuring out what the people they're working with's ideal actually is, right? So it's saying don't do that, and we avoid hysterical thinking or advice. It says, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, and I'm sure some of you have either told other people that or have heard people tell you that throughout the years if you've been sober long enough to, create a bunch of sexual wreckage in your life. It says, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. Now, this is not necessarily true, okay? If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we'll be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. We're going to underline and highlight this whole paragraph. Now, this has not been my experience. As I told you in my fear inventory, I've created a lot of wreckage sexually with women, with dishonesty, with cheating, all kinds of stuff, right? And I'd done it over and over and over again, getting in relationships, cheating on the relationships, getting out of the relationship, getting in another relationship, and over and over and over and over again. There were times where I was sorry, and there's times where I wasn't sorry. There's times where I threw my hands up in the air and just gave up. And it's like, oh, this is who I am. I'm just going to do this, So I've definitely gone in and out of like that. What they're talking about here, and I've stayed sober through it. Now, granted, it sucked. It created a lot of emotional unmanageability, and I did try to kill myself a couple times in sobriety, so it wasn't amazing, and I don't suggest it, but that was my story, So maybe I'm the exception, I'm not sure, but yeah. Now, this next paragraph, though, is absolutely my truth. It says, to sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. Let me read that again. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious. Imperious means overbearing urge, when to yield would mean heartache. So in the margin, you're going to write sex solution, solution to get out of self. And that has definitely been my experience. You know, the more that I've done this book work with people, the more I've healed in my area of sexuality. And in fact, you know, it actually carried me through times in just confusion about what my ideal was, you know, and having faith that basically if I just continue to do the work with others, that I'm going to land wherever I'm supposed to land, you know. And somehow I've been able to land in a relationship that has lasted 6 years, and that is already 3 times longer than any relationship that I've ever been in before. And I did not believe in relationships for a while. I was one of those people that, you know, thought that most of the world's problems were based on the nuclear family and monogamy and all that stuff like that. And I mean, I've gone through the gambit in terms of ideas about sexual ideals, but you know, however it is, I've healed through this process of just constantly working with others and believing that at some point, wherever I'm supposed to be is where I'm supposed to be, but continue to practice being the blessing, and the clarity will come, you know? So it says, and again, I also want to point out that for the, you know, steps are in order sticklers, again, they're telling us to work with others. So if you haven't practiced up until this point, you're not going to know what they're talking about, you know? Because working with others and getting outside of self is, again, even what Dr. Silkworth was talking about when he was talking about he had not seen anything contribute more to the rehabilitation of these people than the altruistic movement growing up in them, the selfless movement. So this idea of helping others to get better versus getting better to help others is very true, right? So if you're doing this, if you're new, if you have time, if whatever, it doesn't matter. I hope that you are actually utilizing this book and this work to pass it on to other people, because that's the magic. What's coming out of my mouth is whatever, but what's going to come out of your mouth and teaching other people and what that's going to mean to you in the process that you're going to have in connecting with others and connecting to a power greater than yourself, which is an infinite well of power through this process, that is the magic. It says, if we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility, uselessness, and their fatality. So they'll kill us. And we've talked about why already. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We've begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look upon them as sick people. And we're going to circle and highlight sick people. Again, you're going to feel that more if you're working with other people, because if you're working with a lot of people and taking them through the book, there's only so many personalities that exist in this world. Eventually, you're going to work with someone who's got a personality of someone that you resent. And for some reason, in this context of, you know, taking that personality through the book, compassion grows from that. You know, that's just the logic. It says, we have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out things of the past. Straighten out the past if we can. We're going to underline, we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. So we basically have the foundation for our 8th step list so far. Now, there's going to be more writing in terms of completing it, but, you know, even the resentment list itself and the sex inventory should have put most of the people that we owe amends to in that. So it says, in this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you're convinced that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from God. If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. Now remember, it's just a beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. So you're going to underline this sentence, and you're going to underline and highlight this whole page here. So they're saying that we made a beginning. They're going to talk about it in the 5th step when we do our next session, you know, that an inventory is not really complete unless you read it to somebody else. And you've swallowed some truths about yourself, but not the whole truth. And that whole truth really comes from, you know, reading to somebody else and getting outside perspective, because remember, this inventory is still tainted with our own emotional charge, right? And our perception is not necessarily on about that. So if you have any questions about the sex inventory or the fear inventory, feel free to comment below. And yeah, we'll continue with the fifth step next time. See you.